Next up, we have Reid Sexton, who is Group Head, of External Communications for Asahi Beverages. Now, Reid is a former journalist who worked at major newspapers in London and Melbourne. During his 10 years as a reporter, he reported on and broke many major stories. He left journalism in 2012 and has worked in corporate affairs ever since across government and the non-for-profit as well as corporate sectors. Reid's going to be speaking on doing more with less, communications on a shoestring. Reid, are you ready to take it away?
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Christy. I'm really good. Yeah, I'm great. Oh, fascinating just listening to Mo then. I didn't realise I was on mute, so excuse me just coming in abruptly. Yeah, thanks very much. Firstly, just a confession from me. I'm not the most adept technological person and always get a little nervous when it comes to Zoom presentations and the like. So I'm hopeful now that you can see both my face talking and the start of my PowerPoint presentation. If this is not the case, hopefully someone can let me know ASAP. And if I don't hear anything, I'll assume everything's going okay.
Nope, it should be good, Reid. It should be good.
So you can see the PowerPoint there?
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. Great. So again, thank you for the introduction, Christy. Just to build on that a little bit. My name is Reid and I lead external communications at Asahi Beverages. We are now the largest beverage company in Australia following our purchase last year of Carlton and United Breweries. We produce and sell and market a range of iconic Australian brands such as Victoria Bitter, Great Northern, Schweppes Lemonade, Cottee's Cordial. We also produce Pepsi products, energy products, and all sorts of very well-established and well-known brands. My job within the business is to lead external communications, and what this effectively means is liaising on a daily basis with journalists, both with respect to their queries to us, but also proactively when we roll out external communications campaigns that seek to promote our business, build our reputation, and of course, drive sales. So some of you listening in at the moment might think that I have the easiest job in the world, given I work with journalists and have unlimited access to beer, right? Like I can just pick up the phone and say, hey guys, please publish this story and a few slabs will come your way. I then see it appear and bang, we're off to the pub to celebrate. I wish. Maybe it used to be like that many years ago, but it's certainly not anymore. I think now, as everyone really knows, media is more stretched, more 24/7, hungrier for multi-platform content to drive up their online numbers, and more demanding of exclusives than they ever have been before. These changes, which to be honest have only been accelerated by COVID, present challenges and opportunities for us all. But before I kind of dive into what these challenges and opportunities are, I think it's worth kind of talking about what the current environment is for people who work in external communications, such as myself, or for people who work in similar roles like PR and corporate affairs. I don't think I've ever heard an external comms leader say before that they're overstaffed, but COVID has obviously caused enormous disruption, not just to society and the way we live, but of course to business and to bottom lines. And I think probably everyone listening in today will be able to relate to that. And so everyone, not just those of us in external comms, are being asked to do more with less. Indeed, perhaps more so now than at any other stage in the nearly 20 years that I've been working in the media. So for people who do work in external communications, smarter, more efficient working is the new norm in a post-COVID world. And for some, that will indeed be working on a shoestring budget. For others, it will be working on greatly reduced budgets. But regardless of what the financial situation is, changes to our jobs, changes to the media mean that ways of working are changing. And so I'm talking about smart working a little bit, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, it is a bit of a buzzword, isn't it? A bit jargony. And, you know, in external comms, we're taught to not use jargon. We're taught to use plain language to cut through that jargony crap So let me perhaps build on what I mean when I talk about smart working. Smart working for people like me these days is understanding what are our most important external relationships and how do we best utilise them to help us ensure that our organisation's stories get the audience and the interest they deserve in a post-COVID world. And look, in my experience, the most important relationships you can have when it comes to external comms, without a doubt, is with journalists, particularly those who you've known for a long time. I do want to kind of challenge, I guess, one of the subheadings here of my presentation, because journalists are not really our partners. And I say that with no disrespect, but the fact is it can be quite problematic to treat journalists as partners. And frankly, we sit on different sides of the communications fence and their responsibilities and goals are usually quite different to ours. But it's critical to discuss journalists and how they can help us in the context of external comms planning, because they are a critical part of doing external comms more intelligently post-COVID. Sadly though, I guess both during my time as a reporter, which was for about 10 years in different newspapers, and then on the other side of the fence where I am now, I've seen people frequently treat journalists like they're the enemy. This is crazy to me. This adversarial way of working does not help build the long-term relationships you need. Yes, journalists have responsibility to report the facts and they will sometimes inevitably print stories that you don't like. But often the interests of comms practitioners and the interests of journalists align. Both parties want their stories to be factual, well told, and attention grabbing. So it's our job as comms practitioners to help make this happen. So why do I believe journalists are the most important relationship that, someone like me can have? It might be obvious for some of you listening in, but for others, it might not be so obvious. And I think this might be because for more than 20 years, we've been told how mainstream media is on the way out. 25 years ago, it was the rise of blogs, then it was the rise of so-called independent journalism. And in the last 10 years, it's been social media, all of which are supposed to have ushered out the old age and brought in a new age. And now, while these different forms of media all contribute to the rich media landscape that we have here in Australia, and while they're all important in their own way, I think particularly social media, the fact is it's still mainstream media that dominates the conversation. The latest figures show that the ABC, news.com.au and the 7 News websites each get more than 10 million unique viewers a month. It's just staggering numbers, right? And even newspapers, which were meant to have died years ago, still have an enormous audience. For example, the Sydney Morning Herald, which of course is not even a national publication, gets 8.5 million unique readers across its newspaper and websites each month. So mainstream media really remains the major force in shaping opinions and driving change in this country. Now, not every external comms campaign that someone like me launches is going to get picked up by the mainstream media, and that's fine. I often work with journalists from smaller specialist publications, such as those who might only cover beer or might only cover the hospitality industry or the soft drink industry. But these publications across their website, their social media channels and their hard copy magazines can still propel the stories that we want to tell to tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people who otherwise would never have heard about them. So my point is this: every external comms strategy that wants to reach a wide audience must consider journalists as a critical stakeholder. And Facebook's decision, this week or last week has just reinforced that. It's forced even more people off social media and back to the mainstream sources to get their news. But, if we as comms practitioners are to do more with less and work smarter in this new world, we need to understand how journalists' needs and their challenges are changing in this new world. We need to adapt with them. For example, the #1 website in Australia that receives about 11 million viewers a month is the ABC, which was traditionally the national television and radio service. #2 on the list of top websites is, I think, Channel 7 News. So the unstoppable rise of the online space has disrupted journalism and the journalism model, but not in the way that many people thought it would. Because what it's done, it's actually in some ways consolidated readership and locked it into the mainstream sources, but it's turned broadcasters like the ABC or Channel 7 into newspapers as well, who now need photos and long detailed copy to go along with their stories. And it's turned newspapers such as the Sydney Morning Herald or the Herald Sun into broadcasters who need video to get eyeballs and to promote on social media. The digital revolution has also helped, I guess, create the 24/7 news cycle, which we hear so much about, which in turn is responsible for things like a free-to-air 5 p.m. news bulletin, followed immediately by a free-to-air 6 p.m. news bulletin that goes for 1 hour instead of half an hour. And it's created news websites that are literally unsatiable beasts, always crying out for more content. What the digital revolution has done is ultimately create cross-platform media companies who quite seriously just want every bit of content they can get, and they want it all the time. Paradoxically, however, most newsrooms haven't been this small in decades. The digital revolution has fueled and fed this growing appetite for news, but it has smashed traditional advertising revenues. For example, when I was at the Age newspaper, I started there 15 years ago, there were literally hundreds of reporters and dozens of photographers. I think now there's less than 100 reporters there and perhaps just 5 or 6 photographers on staff. You know, with the slack now being picked up by copy from foreign newspapers or from wire services or just from people on the street who are filming things on their phones, kind of like what Mo was alluding to earlier. My point is that your typical newsroom these days has more competition, more space to fill, and frankly, more to do than ever before, but with less staff and with less time to do it. So this is the situation that's facing my most important external contacts, and I think the most important contacts of any external comms practitioner. So what smarter working looks like then, what smarter working looks like then is understanding what journalists now want and the pressures that I've just outlined, and how people like me can help journalists overcome these pressures and fulfill their needs. So what do journalists want? Well, they want readers, they want listeners, they want viewers. And for many of them, the most important thing is they want subscribers, because that's how they're judged internally, and that's what pays their wages. In today's environment, if you're not helping them achieve these goals, then your proactive PR initiative is off to a very bad start. In a time-strapped and resource-poor environment like today's newsroom, the things that help drive great stories are much harder for journalists to find. I'm talking about things like great photos, great action-packed TV vision, real-life case studies, which are possibly the hardest thing for a stretched journo to locate when they're on deadline. And these challenges have only been exacerbated by COVID, which has made people harder to track down. It's made places harder to enter, and of course, it's just made traveling around the place more difficult. So I believe that, well, in fact, I don't believe it. I know that we as comms practitioners can separate ourselves from the pack by helping journalists source content that they mightn't have been able to get otherwise. We can provide the great photos, the great TV vision to them that they wouldn't have otherwise had. And we should always be offering up meaningful case studies every time we pitch a story to a journalist as part of our external comm strategies. You know, we should know and assume that most journalists now simply don't have the time to find case studies or to find the great photos and TV vision like they once did. It is for many a sad state of affairs, but the world is changing and we need to change with it, you know. And I think this changing media landscape combined with COVID, it does mean that journalists are facing challenges like they never have before. So if we can provide them with news quality content that makes their lives just a little bit easier, it can deliver big benefits for everyone. It helps us get our stories out there. It helps journos by delivering everything they need for a nice piece. And it helps their audiences who get a fuller and more interesting story as a result. Now, not everything has changed, of course, with the creation of the 24/7 news cycle and the so-called digital revolution. Journalists still need the story to be interesting, exclusive if possible, and it still has to be factual, and it still needs to come from reliable sources. That will hopefully never change. What has changed is that any external comms campaign that starts with hitting send on a text only, mass mail out generic media release is so last century that it's probably going just to end up in the newsroom's junk email, where far too many well-meaning PR releases go to die. So, what does working smarter actually look like in practice? Well, what it looks like for our business is that we engage freelancers more than we ever have before. And indeed, there are more freelancers, and I'm talking about freelance photographers and freelance cameramen, who are on the market than ever have been before, because sadly, there has been such significant redundancies in newsrooms across the country. So every time we launch an external comm strategy now, pretty much, we'll hire a trusted freelance photographer for a cost of anywhere between $500 and $1,000, and pay a similar price for a cameraman, and then use that material and feed it out to journalists who are often very grateful to be receiving it because they're so stretched. And for those of you listening in who truly are on a shoestring budget and for whom those costs are too much to bear, there exists so much online training and other ways, as Mo alluded to earlier, to train yourself to get to the point where you can create news quality content. So it is something that I would encourage any external comm practitioner to do, because you just can't beat the creation of that engaging news quality content. And it's something that journalists will continue to need and will probably need even more of in future as things become even more stretched. So speaking about how we do this at Asahi Beverages, a good example comes from just earlier this month when we launched a new plastic recycling plant in Albury with our joint venture partners. This, for us and for anyone interested in recycling, is certainly important and worthy news, but maybe not on the face of it cracking TV. But we hired a freelance cameraman to proactively shoot, and we supplied local reporters with drone footage of the site that we had filmed, as well as some interesting recycling vision that we had. And in the end, we got some great local coverage as a result of what we provided them. We also hired a photographer to shoot fun, action-packed shots of the event, which we then sent out along with the media release to newsrooms across the country. And we sent this out to these newsrooms because obviously they couldn't attend the media event, which was held in Albury. In the end, dozens of different news outlets from across Australia who didn't attend the event ended up running the story using the photos that we'd shot. And of course, it's impossible to tell how much our photos help get those stories across the line, but it certainly never hurts to be providing journalists with this great news quality content, because it just gives them more to work with and increases the chances that your great story will get told to a wide audience. Similarly, we recently relaunched Foster's Beer, something that many of you may be familiar with from its heyday in the 80s. You can see on screen some great examples of the truly nationwide coverage that we got of this launch. When we sent out material for this campaign, we drew extensively on the CUB archive, pulling out ads of Paul Hogan and other kind of classic so-called B-roll vision to give reporters something fun to play with these stories. We used content that was all ours to really create great visuals that generated buzz around this, that drove interest around this, and ultimately, hopefully, drive sales of this new old beer as it gets rolled out across the country. Similarly, about a year ago, when the devastating bushfires hit Australia, we engaged with the Australian Navy to deliver beer into bushfire-hit Mallacoota to restore spirits there. And in turn, we were able to provide this vision to the media to show a brighter angle to what was at that stage a horrific story. You know, the fact is the newsrooms were too under-resourced to report that positive story. They no longer had their staff in Mallacoota because sadly the fires had moved on and so had their staff. So we helped get this story out there and we helped film the vision for them. And in the end, we got some lovely positive coverage that hopefully put a smile on the faces of a few people after what had been many devastating news stories. You know, the provision of great photos, great vision, and just great content in general, for me and for this business more broadly, whenever we're launching an external comm strategy, it's no longer a, why are we doing this? The question we'd need to ask now is, why aren't we doing it? You know, really, it's just such a great asset to have for people in my job that, you know, there really needs to be a good reason for us not to be paying that little bit of extra money to secure all this content. And yes, it is a slight investment, but in the scheme of things, when you look at the potential ROI, you can really get fantastic results with it. And now the vision and content that we film can be used, you know, not only by journalists, but also by organisations such as ours on our own owned channels, which I will get to in a moment. But before I do, I think it's important that I point out that journalists are not the only external relationships you can or should draw on when you're wanting to execute an effective communication strategy. As the title of my presentation sort of indicates, partners can be, and when I say partners, I mean true partners, you know, people whose interests you are aligned with. They can be a wonderful way of driving interest in a story. Indeed, you know, a big corporate such as us simply talking about the good work we're doing, you know, it has the potential to be a pretty boring story. So I think it's incumbent on people with jobs similar to mine to always be assessing how partners can help us tell our stories. It's far more powerful that way than just CUB or Asahi Beverages going out alone and talking about the good work we might be doing. So when I say partners, what do I mean? Well, anything really. I'm talking about partners such as customers or partners such as suppliers or organisations that you might be supporting that can really kind of create colour in the story and help bring your external comm strategy to life. Now, I'll just click through here. So yes, like I said, I think it's incumbent to always assess how external partners can help drive interest in stories, because it's just, it can be quite monotonous just to hear a company talking about itself. Customers, suppliers and organisations are those sorts of partners that I'm thinking about, but there can be many more there. Now, I've just clicked through to a recent example from our business of how we drew on our relationships with external partners to really create some lovely media coverage. It's from last year, and this is from a commercial initiative that we launched called Club Connect, which was aimed at helping struggling local sports clubs. We contacted one of our customers, which was a community sports club in Melbourne. We took our own photos and our own vision, and we arranged for this local sporting club based in South Melbourne to be interviewed by the press. This vision that we had and having our partners in the form of the footy club talk about it elevated the story from a fairly one-dimensional piece about a new commercial play that we were involved in to a fully formed story that really brought to life a problem and demonstrated what the solution could be. You know, the fact is, external partners such as customers or suppliers can help drive your stories forward in ways that just can't be achieved on your own, because they can make the story so much more interesting. And another example that I'll refer to is a fundraising drive that Asahi Beverages launched late last year to raise $1 million for vulnerable children affected by COVID. It supported children via the Smith family, and it was incumbent on me to raise awareness about it, to help drive the fundraising and help ensure that we got as close to our $1 million target as we could. But, you know, let's be honest, I think it's as dreary as dishwater to hear a big corporate such as us bang on about the good work we're doing. I mean, frankly, who cares if a big business is patting itself on the back, right? I don't think any journo is going to inflict that upon their audience. So what we did is we engaged with our wonderful external partner, the Smith family, and organised for them to speak to media about the problems that children faced and how people on the street, or I should say, you know, just normal, everyday, regular Australians could contribute to our campaign and how that would bring about tangible change in these children's lives. We also used the Smith family to source case studies of children or who are now young adults who could speak to how the Smith family had really helped them through difficult periods in their life. Again, introducing a human element to this story and bringing to life what the potential problems are and the potential fixes. And ultimately, we got nationwide coverage for this campaign, something that we were pleased with because it helped drive the fundraising and ultimately helped raise money for kids in need. But it's coverage that we never would have gotten had we not engaged the right external partners to drive home why the campaign was so important. But, you know, I guess you can have all the content in the world, But if your story is not well told, then your external communication strategy is going to fall flat. So working smarter post-COVID means assessing who each of your potential external partners are, figuring out how they can help, and then how you can help them do this for you. Like everyone listening in today, we, of course, have our own owned channels. I'm talking about things like LinkedIn and things like Facebook and our website, of course, which attracts a surprisingly high amount of attention sometimes. These channels are all important, but if we're using them to communicate messages of real interest, I would always prefer that journalists run with the story first and then have the journalists post the story simultaneously on the news outlets' popular social media platforms, which have enormous reach, as I flagged earlier. But, you know, that doesn't always happen. For better or worse, people like me don't get to control what journalists write, and sometimes they show no interest in our stories at all. Therefore, when that happens, our owned channels are great to get the messages out there that otherwise we wouldn't have been able to get out there. Or if the media has reported on our messages, we use our own channels to amplify these messages. And they can be a very effective way of doing so because you have virtually complete control over what is said there. When it comes to getting traction on social media, be it LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, I think by 2021, it should go without saying that videos and photos are critical to getting good engagement, which actually just reinforces the importance of shooting your own content, which I was just talking about. Because not only do we use the photos and videos and other content to give to journalists, but we also use it on our own channels for the purpose of amplifying the message and engaging with as many people as we can. And it's fair to say we get incredible engagement on our social channels. I think it helps to have some of Australia's most famous brands. You know, VB has something like 150,000 followers on Facebook, Carlton Draft, Great Northern, similar numbers. But, you know, also on LinkedIn, which for us is corporate brand led, tens of thousands of people regularly see our LinkedIn posts. And, you know, that can be hundreds of thousands when it's on Facebook. It's kind of quite staggering to think how many people you can actually reach on social media. Like I said before, my preference often is for traditional media because that is still where the conversations happen. It's still where opinions are formed and it still reaches the widest audience without a doubt. But who would have thought even 10 or 15 years ago that you could just write a message yourself on a computer, hit send, and within a few hours, it's been seen by hundreds of thousands of people if it goes viral. It's still something that kind of freaks me out, to be honest. But anyway, I think the important thing for businesses like ours is to understand what content belongs where when it comes to social media. For example, at Asahi Beverages, we use our corporate brand on LinkedIn. When I say corporate brand, I mean literally the Asahi Beverages brand or Carlton and United Breweries, which we purchased last year. We use these corporate brands to push out our messages on LinkedIn because via LinkedIn, we get to speak to many of our key stakeholders, such as government and regulators, and of course, employees and potential employees. On Facebook, however, we use our consumer-facing brands. You know, we have VB talking in a VB kind of way directly to consumers on Facebook. We have Carlton Draft and Great Northern and many of our other brands doing the same thing. If you get that wrong, though, it can cause issues. It's not appropriate in many ways for Carlton Draft, for example, to have some of the footy type pub banter that brand represents. It's not appropriate to have that sort of banter on LinkedIn, but it works perfectly well on a place like Facebook where brands can really be themselves. The fact is our iconic consumer brands need a place where they can shine, and Facebook is perfect for that. But it's something that we are always mindful of. I guess it's fair to say that our business does take social media very seriously. And a few years ago, we began in-housing our digital capability. Since then, we've steadily grown this team each year so that it now has dozens of employees. We call it Clubhouse because it came from CUB. And even though it had dozens of employees before the pandemic, I think the importance of Clubhouse to our business has just been highlighted by COVID, because we just saw how important it was to be forging those deeper, more personalised connections with consumers. For example, or I guess a good example of how we use Clubhouse to really drive home connections with consumers and other critical stakeholders came last year when we launched a campaign called For the Love of Your Local, the purpose of which was to generate badly needed cash flow for pubs across Australia that had literally been shut down overnight in the wake of the COVID pandemic. These pubs quite literally faced going out of business forever. We identified this problem and we knew that they needed money urgently to pay their bills and other things, or else they might never reopen. So we launched this For the Love of Your Local campaign, which was designed entirely by Clubhouse and the dozens of digital employees who work there. For consumers, the campaign worked by purchasing a voucher that was the cost of just one beer, say about $10. But what they did with that voucher when the pub eventually reopened down the track was they could use it to exchange for 2 beers. So for consumers, it was 2 for 1 beers. But for the pub owner, as soon as that purchase was made, they got the cash straight away. So it literally created cash revenue for these pubs while they were shut down. And look, it was a wonderful initiative. But because it was all managed in-house, we were able to manage it in such a way that the thousands of pubs who were involved, when they inevitably had problems, they were dealt with quickly and effectively. When we had to deal with the complex point of sale arrangements involved in delivering a program like this in just a couple of weeks, we were able to turn the issues around, get them in front of the right people straight away and solve them. And fundamentally what it meant was that we were able to identify a problem and go some way on the way to solving it because all of this capability was now in-house, and it was centered around an owned external channel in the form of our website, which was what both the consumers and pub owners interacted with. It's something that our business was extremely proud of, and it was all managed in-house. What it achieved was in just a couple of weeks, via our Clubhouse team, our own channels, and the interest that the traditional media showed in the program, we were able to generate about $2 million for pubs in their hour of need. The program also generated major nationwide media coverage, and it demonstrated that we care about our pub partners and were able to support them when they most needed it. And very importantly, it also helped maintain and reinforce meaningful connections between us and our consumers.
Reid, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to remind everyone that with 4 minutes left, if you have any questions, please share them in the live Q&A box so that he can answer them for you.
Thanks, Christy. How do I access the live Q&A box? May I ask?
I'll read it out to you. It's on the platform for on air, but no worries. There's nothing there yet. I'm sure people are just going through the presentation.
Yeah, no, that's
right
fine.
now.
I just didn't want to be missing any. Thank you. So, talking about own channels, it is quite extraordinary what you can do, not only in generating interest from an external comms point of view, but the control you have allows you to solve problems, deal with your stakeholders, not just in a communication sense, but in other ways, and deliver what we think are quite incredible results. For me, this For the Love of Your Local campaign highlighted what in-house digital capability can deliver, and how own channels, which in this case was a website supported by social, can allow you to drive and control campaigns in a way that can deliver, great results for stakeholders, but also meaningful reputational outcomes. I've gone on for a little bit longer than I thought I would, so I'll just kind of finish up by addressing the last point in my presentation, which is, leveraging internal influences and how you can best do that. I think in an external comms sense, just quickly, one of the great things you can do, and what I often do before you launch an external comms campaign, is let the leadership team in your business know the day before that it's coming, not just the CEO, but let everyone know, not even just the leadership team, anyone who's important know, so they can share the story on LinkedIn. That can generate tens, if not hundreds of thousands of extra engagements that you might not have otherwise gotten, particularly if your leadership team is very well connected on LinkedIn. We also engage our in-house team, Clubhouse, to pump up all our releases on social media, engaging our hundreds of thousands of followers on Facebook. We also use our own channels to engage people internally with things like our website, which we use to regularly write reports on our employees, what those employees might be doing, to give people inside the business so that they know that they are appreciated, and to let people outside the business know about the interesting work that people do at a beer and soft drink company. And just finally,
Sorry, Reid, there is one question that has come in. Are there any DIY video platforms you use to record and edit vision to send to TV or online media with your media release as an alternative to hiring a videographer?
Yeah, sure. For me, I'm in the fortunate position that we generally just pay for freelancers, but I was while doing research for this piece, actually did come across a couple. If the person who asked the question wants to send me an email, I'd be very happy to send them some stuff that I was looking at during the week. I'm not sure if my email is available or if you can pass it on, Christy.
We'll absolutely share it with the audience because I know that there might be questions that come in that we won't get to answer today. But yeah, we'll definitely share it. And
yeah, thank you. And I've banged on for a bit too long, and I'm sorry. But just finally, and speaking of LinkedIn and engaging your internal network, something that I've found to be incredibly effective for broadcasting your message to a particular stakeholder audience is having your CEO and other senior leaders make posts on LinkedIn. It's the last point here, but it helps build their personal brand while conveying important and targeted messages to stakeholders in a way that often can't be done on other platforms. It might not be relevant to everyone, but you can also put money behind them, as we all know, and that pushes the message out even further. But yes, I think senior leaders posting on LinkedIn is a nice touch to often end an external comms campaign and help squeeze out every last ounce of coverage and engagement you might get. So look, on that note, talking about finishing external comms campaigns, I'll finish up now. I hope you found this useful. I hope you've learned something about smarter ways of working in the post-COVID world. And I'll be happy to take any questions either now or via email at any stage. So thank you very much for listening.
No, that's perfect, Reid. Thank you so much for sharing. And we look forward to, any other questions that might come through, please do send it over because you'll absolutely get a response. I know some of the presentations are power-packed and info-packed and probably need time to digest before we think of questions too. So thanks, Reid.
You're most welcome. Thanks very much.
No problem at all. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to come, for sharing your questions, for your comments, for the participation throughout these sessions. We really appreciate it. I know I have had so many takeaways today, actually, from everything from the impressive presentation that we started it, and that was Nicole of Telstra sharing her top tips in regards to using data. I think one of the things that I really took away from that is not only that they use data to determine, what are the potential areas of risk or crises that might need to be managed ahead of time. That's, I think, very familiar with most professional communicators, but they also use data and research to determine the tone and the strategy to adopt. That was probably my favorite takeaway from that particular session. When they realized that climate change research, for example, showed that humor, comedy, and satire can help with combating misinformation. I wonder what is yours. I would love to know if you can share it in the discussion chat. I do have Mentimeter, but I realize that sometimes, it's just a bit of a hassle to open at times. So if you can share it in the discussions, I would love to know what your takeaway is. We would love to see, what was the best part of the sessions. There's been so many points, even including Mo McRae's presentation. That's an exercise I'm absolutely going to be doing before I start a Zoom presentation, just to get myself in the zone. Not an actor by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm going to get myself in the zone and make sure that I can help combat Zoom fatigue just by being more engaging. But yeah, that pretty much wraps us up for today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm chair of IBC Asia Pacific region, by the way, and the IBC is the International Association of Business Communicators. We have chapters all throughout the region and across the world, thousands upon thousands of members to connect with us on the membership platform, the social media section. We've got a magazine, and really, I think that's one thing that I'm taking away every time when I come and connect with communicators is that it's such a wonderful community and group of people that just being able to connect with them, share with them, learn from them is always a incredible opportunity, really, in my own professional development and in my ability to be able to give back to the community. March, by the way, is March member month for IABC. It's 25% off for the small groups package. If you're interested, take a look at the website, iabcapac.com. I'm a volunteer. I don't get anything if you sign up, aside from just being able to connect with you a little easier. But That's it. That's it for today. Thank you so much for staying with us. And I hope that day 2 is just, you're prepared for it, because we've got a whole list of speakers that's going to take you through all sorts of subjects, again, with 2 streams. So you don't have to pick. You can watch the recordings at the end of it. But thank you, everyone. And oh, yes, I love the questions, the comments that are coming in. Michael's, okay, he liked the comment about internal comms becoming the rock stars thanks to COVID. That is true. Use the limelight. Edwina, thank you so much. And thank you for your questions as well. I did enjoy them. Kate Mintaggart, lots of amazing content stories and ideas. Main takeaway is you can reposition and relaunch Yammer. No reason to leave it stale as is. And use Teams integration. I agree. And no matter what platform you're using, try to think, maybe there's things that you've heard of being able to achieve on other platforms. And if you don't have the budget to switch over, it might surprise you what you can do with your current platform. Speak to your marketing department, speak to your techies, and I'm sure that you might be surprised just what level you can take it to next. And sometimes we just need to simplify. You know, Clubhouse is proof that not everybody wants video. I don't know what will happen when we switch to the hologram age. No more pajama bottoms, that's for sure. All right, great. I will leave you. I'm tempted to just keep reading the chat, but I won't keep you here. I'll just enjoy it on the discussion screens. But thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Take care.